Okay, good evening everyone. Bonsoir à tous et à toutes, and welcome to tonight's presentation of OTF Connects titled Tomorrow is Built Today, the Importance of Quality Health and Physical Education Opportunities to Support the Well-Being of All, with David Inglis. We are glad to have you with us tonight. It's a very small group, again, for probably weather reason, I would suspect. It's not unusual when we reach the end of the season to have smaller groups. However, small groups are always great for interaction, so don't hesitate to intervene, to share your ideas and post your questions along the session. David will be really happy to answer them and to interact with you all along his présentation. Et comme d'habitude, je voudrais aussi profiter de l'occasion pour souhaiter la bienvenue à nos collègues franco-ontariens. We're definitely thrilled to have each and every one of you with us tonight. It's also our absolute pleasure to welcome David Inglis for his first OTF Connect session. David Inglis is a health and physical education teacher at H.B. Beale Secondary School and former learning coordinator for health and physical education in the Thames Valley District School Board. He has been a teacher, department head, athletic director, coach, and intramural advocate for 3 years. David presently serves as an active member of the Canadian Intramural and Recreation Association and is an active member of the Ontario Association for the Support of Physical and Health Educators, presently serving as co-president. David is also a member of OASPHE's Curriculum Advisory Committee and has contributed to the development of the 2015 secondary HPE curriculum. David has a passion for physical activity, curriculum development, and engaging staff and students in all types of play. As I mentioned, it is David's first OTF Connect session, and obviously the first time I'll be working with him. I've spent quite a bit of time over his slides, and I can tell you that he's going to share a lot of really interesting information with us tonight. So at this point, I'll invite David to jump in. David, please remember to click on your third button, and then you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. Welcome. As you can see, the title is Tomorrow is Built Today, and the graphic or the picture that you see is from MLSE, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment Launchpad in Toronto. It's one of the locations that OASPHE took us to earlier this year, and the quote is on the wall, and it really kind of resonated about the types of things that they were doing and the outcomes that they were striving for, both academically, physically, emotionally, socially, with the group of students in the, I guess, Jarvis Dundas area in Toronto. So that's sort of the premise behind where this idea came from. I see that Karen has just signed in. Welcome, and Melanie, you've signed in as well. Aviva, I know Aviva and I know Rebecca. So you're going to use the little icon from before, if you don't mind, and the survey icon at the top, and you're going to help me figure out where everybody's from and what you're currently teaching. If you could do that now, that would be great.
So you can see in the top left there's a little A. You can click on that little A and then you can make your selection. Top left corner of your screen.
And I'm hoping that everybody can hear me. If you can't, just let me know in the chat box and I'll fix that for everybody. And if there are any problems or questions, use the raise your hand so that we can address your concerns.
Yeah, I understand that most people are actually teaching in two different sections, so the survey tool is not really appropriate for that. But it's okay to type it in the chat box for David. That will be fine. And thanks for that anyway.
Okay. So, Karen, can you share with me in the chat box what the other might be, so that I have a sense of where I might need to support you? And then we'll move on while Karen's doing that. Okay, so HPE consultant. K to 12. So one of the things that we've been talking about as a provincial organization, OASPHE and OFIA are kind of sister organizations. So OASPHE is the Ontario Association for the Support of Physical and Health Educators, and one of the issues that we've been talking about is raising the profile of what exactly is in the new phys ed curriculum and also how it supports overall well-being in schools. And one of the things that we're constantly struggling with is the perception and the, I want to say, biases associated with what exactly is health and physical education. So we want to make sure that teachers know what's out there. We want to make sure that teachers are aware of how it's connected to the provincial initiatives around mental health and well-being and DPA and all of the other types of things, but specifically from a well-being standpoint, the social, emotional, cognitive, physical, and sense of self and spirit that it supports for our students. So we identified a couple of learning goals. One is to ensure that people understand the fundamental principles of the health and physical education curriculum, and then ensuring that they're reflected in teacher practice, making connections between the fundamental principles and the foundations of a healthy school document, and how the two work in conjunction to support student well-being. Making sure that people are aware of the key priorities that are happening in the province around well-being, DPA, healthy schools, and anything else that you want to talk about tonight. If we leave here with an idea of where gaps might be, then OASPHE and OFIA in conjunction with each other can help support those. Making sure that we're aware of all of the different types of resources that can be used. And I guess the last thing is how the concept of physical activity can support student well-being. Sometimes people don't pay enough attention, or the research is overlooked that says physical activity does this in a positive way to support resiliency, coping skills, physical literacy development, things like that. So as physical educators, we've all seen this icon. It's in the front of the curriculum document. It basically is a graphic representation of all of the different component parts of health and physical education. And what I'm curious to know, and this is where you're going to use your writing tool that Michelle identified, is you're going to hopefully have an idea of what that heart might mean right in the center of the chest of the icon. And if you could share with us what your perception might be and just write it in there. Michelle, how do I get rid of my smiley face?
What smiley face? I don't see a smiley face.
Well, from where you have me put it on the map, I put it there. I don't know how to undo that. From those writing tools on the side.
Oh yes. Well, you can just click on the arrow, for instance. If you want to click on the arrow, that would be fine. It should get rid of it.
Got it. Okay.
But don't worry about it, because nobody else can see you, just you.
Okay. Melanie, is that your response to what you think the heart is? Or is that something else you want to discuss? Or the fact that the emphasis is placed on the health as opposed to the physical? So we see the self, the sense of self, which is important from the well-being standpoint, the whole body, a whole self. It's kind of that holistic approach. There's a connection, I think, to, as you said, the self, and therefore the holistic and the well-being associated with what all of these component parts involve themselves with. This is a graphic that we have pulled from, it came from Thomson Publishing. They have a resource that they have produced, and you can see that the link is available to you there, where they have infographics and guides and reports. This is from the UNESCO document, and one of the component parts of it is the connections that are often overlooked. So people who are involved who are physically educated can expect to live longer, earn more, learn more, do better, make better choices, and move more. So why wouldn't we want to do that? And the fact that all of these things are component parts of the well-being and the well-being initiatives within this province and in our schools, how are we positioning the health and phys ed curriculum to support well-being, which is basically the premise behind tonight's presentation. Just a little bit more about OASPHE. So we have a mission statement. It's made up of educators, classroom practitioners who provide a strong voice to lobby, advocate, and support the development of health and physical education. The key word for us here is quality curriculum. It's about the quality delivery of what is in the document. So the mandate is the advocacy for development and delivery of a quality health and phys ed curriculum, and so to support teachers, whether they be teachers in positions of responsibility at the system level, like consultants, or department heads, or first-year teachers, 10-year teachers. And the other area that we'd really like to target is the pre-service teachers, to ensure that they are being prepared to deliver what is recognized as a really well put together curriculum document. We have a Twitter account, and that's at @supportphe. We have a new website, and it is at www.oasphe.ca. We have a provincial-wide listserv, and I would say that we have close to 125 members. So if you have a question or you need some information, we are able to provide it for you. And again, from K to 12, we're made up of a variety of people in all levels and across the board, or sorry, across the province. We have representation in all areas of the province. So that's just something that I wanted you to be aware of. The other piece to the puzzle is people don't realize the different types of connections that we have. Everybody knows who OFIA is. Everybody is aware of OFIA as the people who produce the resources that we're all using to support the health and phys ed curriculum. However, the other piece to OASPHE is we have representation in all of these major committees or organizations within the province. So CIRA, you heard I have an involvement with CIRA. It's the Canadian Intramural Recreation Association. So it's focused on mass participation, intramural-based skill development. We've been writing and reviewing AQ courses for Ontario College of Teachers. Ontario Healthy Schools Working Table, we have representation there. We have a rep on the safety guidelines. As you heard, I'm one of the representatives on the Curriculum Advisory Committee. We're doing this presentation to OTF, so we have representation there. Right now, Whistler is hosting the PHE Canada National Conference. One of our executive members sits on the Council of Provinces, and we are one of the primary sources for reviewing the material that's produced through Thomson Educational Publishing and others, but right now we have been focused with Thomson and their new HAL 2.0 textbook. What I would like you to do is, similar to what we did with the map, is can you place icons on the areas that you are most familiar with. If you're familiar with all of them, then great, put a dot or whatever and everything. just curious to know where people are at and what your experiences are.
To access the icon, you go to the bottom of the vertical tool strip, and you can pick up an icon right there.
And while you're doing that, you can see in the chat box that I provided the various links that are necessary for you to be able to access these things. The one thing that we did discover through our representation on PHE Canada is that they just changed their website. So when you go there now, it won't look the same. So what I will try to do for Michel before he sends out the links is update the links to the new PHE Canada website so you can find the things that I'm going to identify. So that's great. It looks like you're all familiar with a variety of the things. What I'd like you to do is, can you place an X on anything that you don't know about or are not currently using in your practices or your teachers are not familiar with? So you're placing an X on anything that your teachers or yourself may not be familiar with. So I see an X on PHE Canada, and I see an X on Thompson.
Can I just jump in, Karen? Karen, you need to use the vertical tool strip. So it's this tool strip here on the side of your screen, and you go to the bottom icon, and you should be able to grab an icon from there. It's on the vertical tool strip that you need to go.
Smiley faces keep moving. Yeah, I had that trouble too, Karen. I'm sorry. Okay, that's great. I have a pretty good sense. We're familiar with quite a few, and there's a couple and that gives me a little bit of information. As we go through some of the later slides, hopefully we'll be able to address some of those things. So here's a question that we've used over the course of the last year and a half or so. We've used it in relation to just health and phys ed. We've used it in relation to intramural activities. We've used it in relation to a variety of contexts. The context here that is sort of the overriding premise behind the presentation is how are we utilizing the health and physical education curriculum to create the necessary conditions to enhance the well-being of students that will allow students to thrive. So in a couple of the videos you're going to see, we will hear about well-being, we'll hear about the ability of students to thrive. What I really would like you to do is consider how we are positioning within our schools, within our school boards, within our departments, the health and phys ed curriculum, and whether people are aware of all of the connections it has to both well-being and the ability to create the necessary conditions for students to thrive. Avita's hearing background noise. It might be me touching my microphone. I'm not sure what exactly that might be, so just keep us posted if you would, Aviva. So we've seen this. This is the outcome of the focus groups that the ministry did. The ministry was looking for a definition of well-being. The ministry was looking to hear student voice, parent input, teacher input. So this was the outcome, what we heard, well-being in our schools, strength in our society. So what I would like you to do is to sort of wrap your head around a couple of things. There's a video link that Michelle has just provided in the chat box. If you could go there and watch the video, it's about 2 minutes and 25 seconds. I'm going to turn off my mic. when you're watching it, if you have any questions or any comments, please post them to the chat box. And when you finish watching the video, if you could click on the green arrow beside your name, that way I know that everybody has finished watching it and we can move on. Okay, so if you can do that now, that would be great. So again, if you could click on the green arrow, that way I know that everybody's able to engage again. So I see everybody, Karen and Karen Trotter. Okay, so there's Karen's green arrow, and hopefully Karen is back. So there's a couple of things that came directly from this document. One is that well-being is a fundamental to overall student success. So when we look at well-being and all of its component parts, you need all of the component parts in order to allow students to be successful and contribute to their ability to thrive. It goes on to say that students are better able to learn when they feel safe and welcome. They have tools to motivate and make them make healthy, active choices whenever they can. Again, connection to phys ed curriculum, it's skill-based, it's designed to provide them with the tools to make informed, appropriate, age-appropriate decisions. Children and students have strong relationships and a positive sense of self, are more likely to reach their full potential. And it talks about well-being in early years in school settings is about helping children and students become more resilient. And we've heard resilient or resiliency as a key word associated with the mental health initiatives in schools as well. We've also seen this icon, and this is where we have all of the component parts. So self and spirit is in the middle. That's the holistic approach that we want to take with the phys ed curriculum to support the entire person, the whole student, and it requires physical, cognitive, social, and emotional connections. If you haven't seen this, it's pretty straightforward in terms of what the outcome is, and I've included the definitions and information in the notes section of the slide deck, and Michelle will pass that on to people. I've also been told that I have a large number of slides, and therefore I'm not going to spend a lot of time on some. Excuse me, and I'm going to assume that we know some of the components that we're talking about. If I go too fast or you are not comfortable with me moving on, please let me know. So here's a question, and you're going to type your responses in if possible, or type them into the chat box is okay. I'm curious to know, and if you were able to share, types of activities that are taking place in your classroom or your school, and in the case of Karen, where you are in a consultant role, if you're aware of initiatives that are taking place in your school that are supporting student well-being. And again, we're looking at all of the component parts of well-being. What's happening in our schools that's contributing to well-being? So if you could take 30 seconds and jot down your ideas, that would be great.
And again, we are using the writing tool that is located on the vertical tool strip. It's the fourth icon from the top. It looks like a little A, and that allows you to type directly on the slide. Or you can always type in the chat box, obviously.
So I can see Karen is talking about mental health and wellness family nights. Aviva has mentioned Wellness Wednesdays, where there's activities in yoga and drawing. Just to clarify for Aviva, is that during the day, or is that in the evenings? Is it family focused, or is it school based? the check-ins with students to see how they're doing mentally, physically, great. Is that a conferencing sort of situation? What type of check-in? Okay, Viva's got her hand up. Yep.
So Wellness Wednesdays are during, sorry, I've got a virus. Wellness Wednesdays are during the day. It's during nutrition breaks. And we have it for the entire school is welcome to join. And we set up different activities. And we also have on announcements, could be deep breathing exercises, different kinds of activities on Wednesdays.
Okay, great, thank you. The daily mindfulness, are we seeing that these things are supporting all 4 components? Or are they targeting one particular component because it's part of your school goal and your board improvement plan? Karen's got some DPA. I see that Karen August has also indicated that DPA is starting to increase in the schools. Okay, Karen's got goals also include mental health. And can I go back to the circle? Yep. So Melanie's indicated that she's doing mindfulness activities where students aren't forced to, but it's definitely checks in with them in all of the components. Rebecca's increasing schools seeking healthy schools certification. I just saw on Twitter earlier today over 200 schools have been awarded some type of healthy school award from OASPHE, which is great. Just going back a little bit to with support of public health. I know that here in Thames Valley, our Middlesex London Health Unit has sort of a healthy schools initiative where they have prizes as well, so it's not as large scale as OASPHE is, but certainly it's targeting the components of well-being, which is great. So that's good. There's lots of positive things happening. The concern, I think, from OASPHE's perspective is we've already got these people, like these are the movers and the shakers and the ones who have already bought in. And it's how do we get the masses, our colleagues, our parents, our administrators to see the value as well. And sometimes that's a bit of a struggle, and I think that that's one of the reasons that OASPHE went after this particular forum to have the discussions. How many have seen this before? This is, again, out of the ministries, what we heard. They are the 6 components: the self and spirit, the belonging, the relationships, the safety, meaningful learning experiences, and healthy minds and healthy bodies. So that's based on the focus groups, the input from students, what they heard, and classified in into these 6 categories. The other connection that I wanted to make, and that was one of the learning goals, was this Foundations for a Healthy Schools document. And you'll see along the right-hand side, I have taken the 6 elements, and throughout the remainder of the slide deck, I've tried to make connections. So within this Healthy Schools document, you can see that in order to be considered or have a healthy school, you're looking at the students, the classroom, and the school itself, and then you're looking at all of these components, these 5 components that are supporting those things. And then when you get down here to this section on the health-related topics, lo and behold, it's really the phys ed curriculum. And this document is also connected to the school effectiveness framework, that is the mandate that principals are bound by. school boards are bound by. So what's really frustrating is we have this provincial policy, and yet people aren't making those connections and aren't seeing it beyond the label of health and physical education. So when you look at this document a little bit deeper, the positive school climate is certainly going to be an outcome. The health-related topics are all connected to the health and phys ed curriculum, and the health and phys ed curriculum goes a little bit deeper with some of them, or some of the issues related to both mental health, the living skills, and all of the skill-based tools that it can be used for to provide to students. In the next few slides, you will see that what I've done is I've taken the piece, in this case it's to develop the positive relationships from the What We Heard document. I've made a connection to the fundamental principle coming out of the health and phys ed document. So in this case, where it's talking about positive relationships, one of the principles that is the foundation for the health and phys ed curriculum is that programs are most effective when they're delivered in healthy schools and when students' learning is supported by school, staff, families, and communities. All of the relationship pieces that are really important for kids to have. I've taken the parts or the key topics out of the foundations document, and then I've identified some key relationships to that within the health and phys ed curriculum. So in the next little while, what I'm going to do is just put up the slides, let you have a chance to look at them. I'll spend about 20 seconds on each slide. It's the same format. So in this case, it's the fundamental principle number 1. It's connected to developing positive relationships. In this one, it's be connected and feel a sense of belonging. There's the connection to wanting a positive school climate. If it's a positive climate, the kids are going to buy in, they're going to be there. Fundamental principle number 3 talks about physical and emotional safety as a precondition for effective learning in health and physical education. Yes, it's also a precondition for learning anywhere, in any classroom setting. So why is it just isolated for phys ed? So we want to make sure that the health and phys ed curriculum gets positioned in such a way that people are seeing that these connections are there, and that you don't have to be a phys ed teacher to make them. The living skills are really important. In this case, the physical and emotional safety is paramount for kids to learn. So student engagement and social and physical environments. Living skills keeps appearing because it is that set of skills. They are really the learning skills that we all report on, but within the phys ed curriculum, we can actually evaluate them and we build them into our lessons and our structures and our curriculum. And that's an important piece. I've pulled out some things like destigmatizing, getting rid of the stereotypes and the biases because we want kids to feel safe regardless of what they're arriving to our schools and our classrooms with. Identifying personal aptitudes, and again, the mental health component. The mental health piece is there throughout the phys ed curriculum, and it is connected really well, and certainly wants to contribute to the overall sense of what's happening in our schools connected to our mental health initiatives. So I'm looking at a couple of the pieces around the chat. One of the things that Aviva has identified is it's hard to get the principal to buy in. Problem is having the conversation and finding the time to have the conversation and trying to make the connections. They're busy. I understand that. We all understand that. But we really want to make sure that those are part of the discussions around a staff meeting, at a parents' night, at your family wellness nights, it's a great just bulletin boards and displays, and have the documents available so that people can see them. That would be maybe a way to approach that. Where are we going next? So this one is feel engaged in their learning, student-centered and skill-based. It has to be authentic. If they're not seeing how it connects to them and their lives, we struggle with engagement. Curriculum and teaching and learning. The sit and get, the Socratic method, we know doesn't work for the majority of kids anymore. And I'm not suggesting that it has to be technologically based or anything like that to deal with the needs of the kids, but certainly I'm finding, as a former learning coordinator myself, the instructional strategies that teachers have, especially our younger teachers, are not as extensive, and they default to things that they are most comfortable with, and not necessarily are they the best strategies to use with the majority of their kids. The DPA, well, I think one of the struggles that we have with DPA is maybe around, well, why are we doing it? Like, is there that conversation taking place? And it's not because it's an add-on, or it's not because it's important when you look at some of the slides later on. It's just changing the habits and the mindset of both the kids and, in some cases, staff. So it's really important that it's positioned in a little bit different manner, and I think that that's maybe part of the problem that we're seeing. The learning here, again, if it's not student-centered, if it's not about the student, then it's hard to keep them engaged. Safe, physical, emotional, that's the one piece. And again, I refer back to fundamental principle number 3. This one is the one piece, that last learning goal that we were talking about. Physical activity is the key vehicle for student learning, okay? And we want to develop a healthy mind and body. That's the connection there. And then what I've identified in the health and phys ed strand is all of the different types of things that will contribute to everything. I haven't even talked about the physical other than the DPA, but when you look at all of these things, this is all about using physical activity and connecting it to the healthy living components of the phys ed curriculum to give the kids a sense of healthy mind, healthy body. And I think that sometimes, as somebody mentioned earlier, we tend to see a focus on the health, and the physical is physical activity, which, while important, is different from physical education. So just bear with me for a sec as I look at the slides. Can I go back a slide? Viva, this slide? As Rebecca says in one of hers, we need to flip the script a little bit. We need to have those conversations and define what is successful. Hopefully you've all seen these. These are OASPHE's poster series related to the fundamental principles. This is the one that has all 5 of them contained in it, and then each one of them is broken out into an individual one. So they come in a complete set. They are available to download, and they're available to order as well through OASPHE. They're a great starter. I use them in my exercise science or my intro to kinesiology. It's still connected. Is it authentic, and are they getting out of it what they want? If you haven't seen these, I've given Michelle the link, and I've asked him to post this last one where it says play this link. What I'd like you to do is I'd like you to watch that, similar to what we did last time, but it's 5 minutes long, and I only want you to watch the first 2 minutes and 19 seconds till the end of Joanne Walsh. Joanne is wearing a red blouse or sweater. When you get to her, you can listen to what she says and then click off and come back to me, okay? Thank you. Okay, folks, hopefully you're up to the end of Joanne. I just watched it with you, so hopefully you're able to come back. Again, if you can click on the green arrow so that I know. Thanks, Michelle, for doing that. Hey, folks, is everybody there? Okay, I've got Karen back. Aviva's away. There we go. Karen's back. Okay, Rebecca's there. Okay, so I'm hoping that everybody's there, and I'm going to move on if that's okay with everybody. How are your schools working to weave together achievement, equity, and well-being? We know that all of these fundamental principles are connected. We know that all of the information from the focus groups and what we heard is connected, and we know that they're all connected to achievement and equity and well-being. So what I'm curious to know or have a discussion about here is, what are we doing? What is happening in our school boards? And are the initiatives that we identified from before, are they helping bring these things together? So in the next 30 seconds, if you could just explain what it is that might be happening. Michelle, are you there? Is everybody okay?
Yes, we're all there. We're good.
Okay, just got quiet all of a sudden, that's all.
Well, that's the problem, is that you're always kind of talking in the dark. It's hard to get feedback, but people can write in the chat box if they prefer.
Yeah, I'm watching it there. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, on the screen. If they're comfortable with the chat box, that's fine as well.
Okay. Okay, so a lot of climate of learning. Virtue assemblies recognize student successes. That's great. Aviva, would you mind sharing climate learning for me or for the group? Oh, character traits. Okay, great. Student voice from Rebecca. Have your say and tell them from me what to do. So you're collecting data from kids, things like that. They're all about pass rates and class averages and things like that. Is that data that's looked at? Is there a connection to what's happening based on school climate surveys, which is, I guess, is what was referred to before. We all do school climate surveys. The question is, do we see the data? Are we able to act on the data or not? Healthy schools committees, great. There's all kinds of things that are really good and really happening in schools. The problem is, are they sustainable? Who's doing them? Is it the same people all the time? You would like it to be that collective whole, that entire community made up of staff and students and parents and your community-based resources. That's, I think, an important component part that sometimes gets missed, and it always falls on the same groups and the same people in schools. So positioning the phys ed curriculum is a way of helping support the people who are doing a lot of the work already. So one of the things that we have been talking about, and this is where getting that voice. How is our voice being heard as physical educators? How might we inspire change? So there's a few questions that I've posed here. One is around lack of professional learning. Unfortunately, a lot of the money and a lot of the release time is attached to literacy and numeracy. This year, because of the release of the DPA, or the revamped DPA policy, we've also seen money allocated for teacher release and teachers on special assignment or DPA leads or something like that. The other thing of concern is, why is the evidence supporting the use of physical education and how it supports learning largely ignored? If you choose to follow me on Twitter when this is all done, if you follow OASPHE, if you follow people like Aviva, you will see that everything, or a lot of the things that we retweet about, are connected to physical activity and what it is doing, and how it helps depression and anxiety, and how it supports change in classroom behavior and things like that. So if that's out there and the evidence says it, why is nothing being done about it? School board initiatives support mental health. Mental health is part of well-being, and it's also designed to support staff and students. It's that time of year where we're all starting to see ourselves spread awfully thin. Some of us are taking on our third and our fourth teams. We're now doing track and field meets and various other things. So what's really important is, how are we supporting each other, and how is what's happening in our school day supporting us? How can we better deal with competing agendas? This is an ongoing concern and an ongoing question. A lot of the things that we've tried to do in our own board have not been well received, because all the release time and all the money and all the supply costs are going to, in this case, numeracy and literacy instructional coaches and things like that. Is the ministry's well-being funding being utilized to effectively support student well-being? You'll see later on that the ministry will give more money to school boards to support well-being, because the mental health language is in there. In a lot of cases, the information or the money has gone to the mental health initiatives, and they're an isolated part of, and not necessarily treated as part of the whole, and that's a bit of a concern. And then finally, how do physical educators become a louder voice to affect change with admin, with superintendents, with directives of education? Those are some of the challenges that we have seen as OASPHE trying to have this conversation. Many of you may have seen this. This is the literacy model. This is part of that conversation, that the literacy, the numeracy, physical literacy, it's no different. It's all part of the curriculum, and it's an important part of contributing to the entire student. And if we are only focused on the literacy and numeracy, there's lots of things that are getting missed out on. So here we go. We've got all kinds of competing things going on. We've got lots and lots of research. Not necessarily does it get dealt with. We've got planning taking place now for next year. We've got initiatives that are in development. The Safe for Schools or the climate surveys are being analyzed, and school board strategies are being developed. So that being said, what's really important is we consider some of these types of things. So if you could use your little icons again and put the icons in, what do you feel are the main health issues facing children in Ontario today? And if you can't use the icon, please feel free to type it into the chat, and you're more than welcome to use, you know, it's almost like a dotmocracy. You can place as many as you want. Okay, that's great. So you can see obesity, mental health, activity levels, addiction, bullying. All right. Off to the side here, you'll see that I've provided a couple of links. One is to OFIA's advocacies. That'll come up repeatedly. And then the other one is their most up-to-date research called Understanding Parent Attitudes. It came from Environics. It was released in February. So based on what you're telling me here, this is what parents are telling us. You'll notice too off to the side, you have a 2010, when it was last done, comparison in terms of up or down. So many of the things that you identified here, so it looks like mental health, anxiety, depression, activity levels, and addiction were the top 3 for our group tonight. Parents in general looked at obesity, mental health, diet, nutrition, activity levels. So we're right thinking the same way. When I first saw this is the one that scared me a lot. I have a 22 and a 25-year-old at home, and they're just having their birthday, one yesterday, one tomorrow. And this one hit home because their generation will not outlive my generation. And that was kind of scary as a parent. And a lot of what we're seeing in schools and in society, we've been having conversations for the last 5 years as we've been ready for this new curriculum to drop about we have a really good strategy within this curriculum to help change habits and help provide kids with the ability to make more informed decisions. So that's just something to keep in the back of your head. These come from Dr. Dean Creelars. He's used these as he speaks about physical literacy and physical literacy development. And if you've ever got a chance to hear him speak, he's an excellent speaker and will change your mindset tremendously. These are other things that we see when we think back to when we were growing up. Unstructured play, empty playgrounds. We used to be out until, especially with the weather like it is today, we would be out until the last possible minute. And then, you know, we talk about active transportation. I look at the kids that come to my school, and I talk to even my grade 9s. Well, my mom or dad drive me. No, I don't take the bus. No, I don't walk home. Things like that. So a lot of the habits that we're seeing today are vastly different than what we grew up with, and what, frankly, I would hope for my own kids. I want them to be outside, and I want them to be able to engage and play. And then the whole social media and the phones in the classroom and all that kind of stuff. There's lots and lots of things that are taking away from their ability to engage in that unstructured play. I think I might have missed it, or is it coming up, Michelle? The link to the next video. There it is. If you haven't seen this one, it's about 1.5 minutes. It's really makes you think a little bit. I show it to my grade 12s, my 18-year-olds, and they get quite a hoot out of it. So take a minute and watch that if you don't mind, please. So hopefully everybody enjoyed that. It's a little bit funny, it's a little bit sad, it makes you think, and it makes you wonder how we can change that. So I'm sorry I missed that. I'm going to skip through a couple of slides. Again, you'll have them in the slide deck, but I have to be cognizant of time, and I have a few more things to do. Not too worried about the poll, but in your own minds, or actually let's do this one because we never got the poll option to work before. So you get to pick A, B, C, or D. To what degree do you feel that teaching health and physical education in schools helps to prepare your students to address these issues of, address these types of health issues? So the health issues we're talking about are on a previous slide here. Or it could be any of the health issues that we saw before. So I've got 2 A's. I got 2 A's, a great deal. Okay, I got A's across the board. Great. Okay, so here's the outcome of Ophia's and Veronica's poll again. So 75% compared to 79% compared to 77%. How important is it that your students are physically active for at least 60 minutes each day? Okay, again, A's across the board. So, and again, you're right where everybody should be. I guess my question to the group, though, would be, all right, let's go back. Let's do this one. Where would you put your colleagues? Where would you put your parents? Would you put them the same spot? Okay, so again, we're the converted. We're the ones that see it as a benefit, and we advocate for it. How do we change everybody else's mindset? That's part of the concern a little bit. John Rady wrote a book called Spark. You know, it's about that research connecting physical activity to social, emotional, cognitive, and physical. Okay, it's not just the physical. There's a lot in Spark, if you've read it, talking about the social emotional connections that people need to have as part of it, and physical activity is a medium to help provide that. You may have seen this one too, talking about, this is where the DPA conversation comes in. The brain on the left, sitting quietly, brain on the right, 20-minute walk. Doesn't even say moderate to vigorous. It just says 20 minutes of activity. So if you get that kind of change in 20 minutes, imagine what a moderate to vigorous burst would be. And then you see connections. And again, we're talking, but we're talking about it, and we know about it, but how do we move our schools and communities and colleagues forward? And again, you're seeing the connections here with these little icons. That relates back to the fundamental principles, and it relates back to the what we heard components. I'll skip that one. This is the most recent one out of the participation report card. It incorporates sleep as well. So for the first time, we're talking about uninterrupted sleep and the importance of having uninterrupted sleep as it contributes to the overall health and well-being, and that's from the 24-hour movement guide. I see, Becky, you had asked about what did we just watch. Can't see it. I don't see it. Or somebody asked, what did we just watch? It was the video is called 5 More Years, or for 5 extra years. And again, the link was provided for you. No poll attached to this one. This is just, there is broad consensus that health and physical education is important for their children. Parents are telling us this, yet we as schools don't necessarily change the importance or the value that we place on it in schools. We still here as OASPHEs will get people, how do I tell my colleagues not to withdraw their phys ed, or how to not, as a punishment when they're not behaving properly or completing their work, rather than flipping it, as Becky said, and say, hey, maybe it's time for a brain break or an activity break so that their focus is a little bit more engaged and will get more accomplished. So again, these are all from the Environics released in February. So we have 3, as we said before, we have 3 main components or advocacies: effective teaching, quality programming, and current resources. So in the next 10 minutes or so, I'm going to go through these slides with a little bit of speed just to make sure I'll stop on the ones that I really want to pay attention to. So I love this quote. Learning to teach requires new teachers to understand teaching in different ways, in ways quite different from their own experiences as students. I used it the other day with a group of NTIP teachers, and they all smiled and nodded. We tend to teach, especially as young teachers, the way we were taught, and that isn't necessarily the most conducive to the implementation of the phys ed curriculum, and it doesn't necessarily contribute to the holistic and the entire student, and certainly doesn't necessarily cater to the majority of students unless we become a lot more aware of what this curriculum does and how it supports all of those things. So again, we'll come back to that question at the very end, but what conditions are necessary for young people to thrive in health and phys ed? I added the H because it is health and physical education. So there is a health component, but within that, there are lots of ways. It's not just sex ed. It's everything. It's how to make good decisions, how to have healthy relationships, how to deal with consent, how to deal with communicating, and advocating for yourself. So social interaction, fun, challenges, increased motor competence, delight, and personally relevant learning. And within that, we see all of the what we heard and all of the well-being, or sorry, all of the foundations for a healthy school and all of the fundamental principles. When we talk about programming, one of the things that we are really pushing for is the development of fundamental movement skills and physical literacy. Canada has its own physical literacy consensus statement. And before I go any further, I've posted, it's a minute 25, just this one that says Sport Wales, Physical Literacy. If you haven't seen it, please watch it. It's great. So I'll be back in about a minute. So hopefully everybody's back, or just wrapping up. Great. So I have about 8 minutes left before I turn it back over to Michael. There is a new PHE Canada website, as I said. So this page, I'll try to find and relink it and send that to Michelle in the morning. But PHE Canada has all kinds of resources around physical literacy. And you have probably seen this. It comes from Canadian Sport for Life as well. So these are referred to in this column here. If you can't catch, jump, run, swim, throw, things like that are your fundamental movement skills, and they contribute to the development of fundamental sports skills and the ability to play a wide variety of activities. So again, the conversations around specialization and things like that certainly comes into play there. Teaching games for understanding is a huge component of the health and phys ed curriculum, and I can make connections to a variety of the fundamental principles and the what we heard components of well-being because of the social component as well as the physical component, and that's a really important piece that sometimes gets missed. A colleague of ours, Ted Mertzoglu, he is one of the people who develops the resources through Thompson. He calls it exercise in disguise, which is a great way of looking at it when we talk about what physical activity does. Fitness Blast, DPA, whatever it is, you're able to provide opportunities for active participation. You can differentiate based on where the kids are at and what their skill level is. It's mass participation. You've got fitness when they don't really even realize they're getting fitness, but they're huffing and puffing and sweating. A lot of fitness goals, goal setting, you're fulfilling your DPA requirements, and it's the support of personal well-being. Okay, so lots of benefits to physical activity and all of these things through the use of teaching games for understanding. This was going to be a poll, but I'm going to skip that unless if you look at that, if there's anything in the other column that you might want to consider, just write that in the chat box. The other piece too that sometimes is overlooked is that there's lots of cross-curricular connections. You heard in the OASPHE video earlier about the teacher incorporating the human development component into the science. Some of the health stuff is in the literacy blocks, things like that. We have a couple of projects in the secondary panel that I'm aware of. One is connecting art and math. Okay, Well, we just wrote a resource for eLearning Ontario with the ministry, combining grade 9 English at the applied level with the healthy living strand. So there's lots of ways to do this and bring it into play. I've made a connection as well for you to the DPA Everyday, which is OFIA's poster. And they also have a couple of resources that I'll get to in just a sec. And again, I'm going to skip this one. The key for me here, or for us here, is what happens if we do this? If we are able to cluster expectations, integrate learning across subjects or across strands, what does it look like and what changes for the kids? In a lot of cases, a lot of things are still taught in a standalone kind of way. A colleague of mine was in my office yesterday talking about the letters home to do sex ed. Well, there is no letter to do sex ed. That's a misnomer. It shouldn't be done, yet we're our own worst enemies sometimes trying to be helpful. If you less is more kind of thing, if you're aware of how to make connections to the big ideas, then parents aren't as focused on certain things, and it's front-loaded. So certainly if the parents are made aware of the parent guides, then you might have a chance to downplay a little bit. So Karen, the question I have then is, what does the letter say? And is it saying specifically, or are you just linking it to the, we're going to teach health, here's the, like we've sent letters from the principal, here's the link to the curriculum, here's the appropriate guide, please let's have a conversation. That's sort of what the letter is saying. Okay. Fair enough. No link, we teach it. Yes, I understand that. You have EduGains through the ministry. You have the parent guides that I was just referring to that help parents understand what's being taught. OFIA has all of the strategies and all of the supports available. The majority of boards in the province have bought in and are accessing these now. There's the Passport for Life through PHE Canada. And then there's Thompson. And Thompson has a variety of resources available, K-12, and teacher professional development opportunities as well through their Huddle community. And I provided the links to all of those things. CIRA's most recent resource, just released at their last conference, is DPA the CIRA Way. So there's that resource. And then in summary, all of these things are available to teachers to help support the delivery of the health and phys ed curriculum. For OFIA, they have a new website called Movement Is. They are going into their third year of instructional coaching, building capacity, and they have the newest resource that they've just released is One a Day for Active Play. It's a 200 activity resource. So if you need more information about any of these, please let us know and we will connect or provide you with the information that you need. You can see in the chat we have been informed that the ministry will be producing similar parent guides with connecting the legalization of cannabis. And they're due out in the fall, and there will be specific updates to the health and phys ed curriculum to try to make sure that it's targeted to the right spot. This was the ministry funding that is coming out again. It's to support well-being, safe, accepting, and healthy schools and mental health. Some boards don't see it. It goes to their mental health lead. It's targeted to removal of discriminatory biases and systemic barriers. I provide you the link to the ministry memo related to EPO funding. And it's co-developed approaches to support staff wellness as well. And then actually Rebecca Richardson from Halton, who's on our presentation tonight, she directed me to this. This came from the Council of Ontario Directors of Education. And what they said in that was Ontario is moving from an age of achievement and effort to an age of learning, well-being, and identity. Improved well-being increases achievement, and academic achievement is crucial for well-being. Well-being constitutes a major achievement. There is little or no student well-being without educator well-being. One of the prime responsibilities is to support young people in developing and building their identities. And humility. No board sees itself as superior. Commit to learning from other systems elsewhere, which all of those things I thought was a great conversation starter related to, if this is what it is and this is what you want, here's a tool through the health and phys ed curriculum to make well-being happen in our schools. Just a thought, and that might be a way of starting those conversations that we're so hopeful to have. This is the last video that I wanted you to watch. It's a minute and 20 seconds. It is the UNESCO support for quality delivery of physical education. And then we'll come back, and there's a quick reflection before I turn it over to Michelle. So I'll click off, and if you can watch that, that would be great. Thank you. So welcome back, everybody. I think it's a nice way of wrapping up and putting the pieces together, having that connections to that quality delivery of a health and physical education curriculum and the connections it can make to your schools and support of our students. I think that that's really what this was all about tonight. So I'm going to ask that you come back to this question, and then I'll turn it back over to Michelle. So what does it mean to thrive, and how can we ensure that our curriculum is accessed in classrooms and schools to effectively support the development of student well-being as a part of their day-to-day experiences at school? So if you could take 10 seconds to think, and then you can write your response in the chat if need be, or if you can use the tool provided. So while you're thinking about that, Michelle, has posted in the chat that you'll receive a follow-up email tomorrow with a link to a resource page, including the recording of today's presentation, as well as all of the parts of the presentation. So thank you, Rebecca, for sharing that. It's about how to frame well-being, as mental health is part of it and not, excuse me, the driving force behind it. Positive communication with principals, for sure. If you have suggestions, Karen, that would be awesome. We're always looking. The whole approach. Thank you, Aviva, for sharing that. So I'm hoping that you have one takeaway, something that you didn't know before, and that you might be able to implement right away, or at least have that conversation right away. And I'm going to turn it back to Michelle and stop talking. So thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, please put them into the chat, and when I get a copy of it, I'll be able to help support and change things. My contact information is there as well, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you tonight. So thank you again.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Really, it was a really wonderful session, and for the first one, it was really, truly excellent. Nothing really has changed from antiquity. The key still remains mens sana in corpore sano. Despite the fact that we had a relatively small group, we had a really great group tonight with a lot of activity, and throughout the session David kept pushing us and challenging us to participate, and I think it was a lot of fun to see all your ideas. And I just want to thank you very much for sharing your enthusiasm and all your ideas with us tonight. You made it look like we had 50 people in the room, so thank you so much. And I must say that I share David's worries. I can tell you that as the father of a 20-year-old who spent far too much time in front of a screen as a teenager, and still today, unfortunately, I would really love if there were more options for physical activity in school, or for more physical activity at university, to engage boys. Things like exotic martial arts or fencing would be great, for instance, because anything to pull them in, because it's really hard to compete with whatever they do in the virtual world. It almost seems like a lost cause. So unfortunately, and I must tell you to also reflect on what David was saying, that a friend of mine who is a pediatrician, told me that when he sees in his clinic a grandmother, a mother, and a child, often the grandmother is the healthiest of the three, followed by the mother, and often the kids don't get nearly enough physical activity, and nearly enough physical exercise, and obesity is a big problem. So that's what he was telling me, and physical education is definitely paramount to health for kids. And as a father, I must say I worry a lot about that. And the 5-year video that you showed, David, was really an eye-opener, and quite sad. I agree. Anyway, so I don't need another 5 years, but I need another 5 minutes of your time. If you can give me another 5 minutes, that would be great. We have about 10 sessions until the end of the season, ending end of May, and 2 sessions that are quite interesting. Next week we have a session by Jonathan So, and it's using math game in the classroom. I don't know if any of you are math teachers, probably not, but it's going to be a very funny session, very interesting session next week. And then the last session of the year by Carl Pierce and John Orr is also of interest, and I'll tell you why in a second. Sorry, here it is. For those of you who are math teachers and were wondering what to do over the holidays, OTF has organized a fantastic conference on July 5th and 6th at the Toronto International Airport at the Holiday Inn. So that's Thursday and Friday of the first week of July. And the conference is called Teaching Math Through Problem Solving. It's part 2. Part 1 was actually presented last summer. And there will be a large number of our OTF Connects facilitators that are going to participate. Marike Goindi, Matt Aldridge, who were both with us in the last 2 weeks, Jonathan So, who will be with us next week, and as I mentioned also Carl Pierce and John Orr, who will be presenting at that conference and will be with us at the end of the year at the end of the month on the 31st. There's a $50 fee to actually register, but it's fully refundable. So if you know any math teachers that would be interested to participate to that conference early July, I'm going to paste the link in the chat box, and you will get a follow-up email as well. I also want to remind you that if you're a qualified teacher and you've completed an additional qualification course in math, technology, or in kindergarten, you may be eligible for a $450 subsidy, and I'm going to paste in the chat box the link to the OTF website where you can apply for that subsidy. Just want to remind you that we really need your feedback. When leaving Blackboard, you will be redirected to a feedback questionnaire. It just takes a few minutes, so if you could do it, that would be great. If not, you can do it tomorrow. And after the feedback questionnaire, you will be redirected to a form where you can enter your name, and that will generate a certificate of participation that you can add to your learning resume. So that's it. I just want to thank you once again. I want to, before I say goodbye to you, I'm just going to paste in the chat board, in the chat box, the link to the feedback questionnaire and to the certificate of participation, just in case you're not being redirected. And I just want to invite you also to follow OTF on social media. So thank you so much for your participation tonight. Feel free to remain online if you have additional questions for David. Otherwise, thanks again for your participation in tonight's session, and we hope to see you soon on OTF Connects. Bonne fin de soirée à tous et à toutes, et merci beaucoup.